Hunter, Rick Hunter. Rick Hunter was thrown out of high school for blowing up the chemistry lab. He got by as an unemployed part-time construction worker. He's a member of Mensa and an avid cave explorer with his fellow explorer, Steve Tucker. Now, I picked this picture of Steve, who's a professional accountant and an amateur cave explorer. I picked this picture of Steve so you could see just how slight of built and slender and skinny he is. They were doing most of their exploring in the country of South Africa, in this district on the map here. They came across a very peculiar area where they entered a cave, which a lot of people have entered. And when they came down to what they call the Superman's crawl here, this was only 10.5 inches wide. Most people did not go further, although, however, a few did. Then they came up very jagged, pitch black, 40 to 60 feet below surface. They came to this area called the Dragon's Back, which is only 7.5 inches wide. They just happen to be one of the too few human beings that's smaller than 7.5 inches wide with the ability and recklessness to go see what's further. So they went down into a chamber which may not have been entered for well over 20,000 years. This is a 60-foot drop. However, remember, it's only 7.5 inches wide. So they sort of slid and scraped down it. Fortunately, otherwise in the pitch black, they may have broken their necks. But down there, they discovered something. This was on Friday, September 13th, 2013. Okay. I want you all to think about where you were on Friday, September 13th, 2013. I know that you were in Toastmasters. I'm sure that you were living in California and you were very busy with your lives. They weren't that different than they are today. That's how recent this story is. They decided to contact, knowing they had discovered something, they contacted Pedro Bashoff. Now, Pedro here in his exploring uniform is kind of rough-looking dude, but he's had many careers in his life, quite often being an explorer for geological companies and universities. He received this motorcycle as a working tool from a university. And again, this is Pedro, your typical university assistant, lab assistant. Here's Rick and Steve. Now, Pedro, as you might gather from this photo, has absolutely nothing to do with going through holes that are 7.5 inches wide. But Rick and Steve were pretty adamant that they had discovered something important. So Pedro did work for Lee Berger, one of the top paleontologists in the world. Now, Lee is Mickey Mantle, Oprah Winfrey, the Barack Obama, Mick Jagger of paleontology. And when you're that famous, you get on the cover of not Rolling Stone, but Science Magazine and Scientific American Magazine. And this all had to do with a discovery that Rick made in 2008. Whoa, back up, back it up, back it up, keep going backwards, come on, keep going backwards. Did I say Rick made this discovery? No. Rick's son, Matthew Berger, a 9-year-old, discovered the clavicle of a $2 million fossil. So now we're at the point where Pedro, Rick, and Steve and Pedro have approached Lee and told them about this very significant find that they've had. Lee's got a problem. He needs resources, and he can't get those resources without better proof. Right now, the story splits off into two versions. If any of you have ever done, Bible study, scholarly Bible study, you know that quite often there'll be one or two or three versions of a story or parable that absolutely contradict each other. I'm going to tell you two different versions of a story. You can decide for yourself which one to believe. Prior to Matthew being over 18, the story was that they had taken Pedro's laptop down and taken a couple photographs, and Lee contacted National Geographic that way for resources. After Matthew became over 18, the story was different. It was that after Matthew was over 18, the story was that they had returned to the cave. It just so happened that Matthew was one of the few people trained in how to properly take a photograph of a fossil that was in South Africa and could fit through a 7.5-inch gap. So Lee sent his 14-year-old son with the two other cave explorers into the pitch black hole down there, where it took them about 2 hours to navigate down, take pictures, and come back up. In that time, Lee probably wondered how much jail time he'd get if anything went wrong with this. It went right. The sun popped through the hole with a great big smile on his face. And Lee now had something to send his sponsor, National Geographic, to get resources to take this further. So here, let me get out of your way. Here is a copy of the email that Lee sent out. In summary, it says, looking for a person, they must be skinny, preferably small. Successful candidate should not be claustrophobic and hold a relevant master's degree or doctorate degree. Must come to Johannesburg immediately and accept a blind mission for no pay. That's a pretty crazy Facebook post. 60 people applied. Like I said, Lee is the pinnacle of paleontology. So people knew if he was asking for help, it was no nonsense. However, I want you to think about these people are PhD candidates. Now they're probably at this point in their life somewhere between $60,000 and $160,000 in debt, trying to wrap up their studies. And maybe they're texting their parents saying, oh, by the way, leaving for Africa, job, no pay, see you when I see you. Okay. It was quite remarkable. Again, the bones were, the discovery was made on September 13th. The Facebook post went out on October 6th. And on November 10th, the team was assembled. I guess there were over 60. You'll notice they whittled it down to 6. And by coincidence or what have you, all 6 are female. They began the expedition on November 10th, 2013. I want to remind you again, here's where they were working, entering the cave, down to the Superman's Crawl. The Superman's Crawl is called that because for most people to get through, you have to have one arm in front of the other, like Superman flying through the sky. Otherwise, your shoulders won't go through the 10.5-inch space. Then climbing back up here in the pitch black, very ragged, shot rocks that have not really been scraped in thousands of years, through the 7.5-inch hole here, and then dropping down 40 feet to find the fossils. Given a job like that, these 6 women said, bring it on. What's the significance of the Rising Star dig? The world's top anthropologists working in East Africa found 100 hominoid fossils in 50 years of work. The Rising Star team found their first 100 fossils in 5 days of work. This 19-day expedition and a second team working a nearby cave a few months later found a total of 1,500 hominoid fossils. That's more than double the entire number of hominoid fossils discovered worldwide. Usually, fossils are found partially enclosed by hard rock or sediment. It usually takes weeks or even months to painstakingly remove fossils from their enclosure. The fossils in the Dinaledi chamber were sitting on top of soft, dusty earth. The majority of the bones in the chamber were articulated. That means the bones were laying in their natural order, fingers to hands to arms to shoulders, and so on. In a future speech, I will elaborate on the findings in the chamber, but I want to conclude today listening to heroines on this expedition. Becca Tuxedo, an archaeologist and PhD student in the Department of Anthropology at American University in Washington, D.C. Marina Elliott, originally from Calgary, Canada, on a PhD in biological anthropology from Simon Fraser University in Canada. Ellen Frankel is a PhD candidate at the Australian National University studying shoulder biomechanics. Hannah Morris is an archaeologist with a passion for understanding how humans and plants interacted in the past. She received her bachelor's from the University of Georgia, a master's degree from the Ohio State University, and will begin her PhD studies at the University of Georgia. Aliyah Gurtov, a University of Wisconsin-Madison PhD candidate researching the effects of seasonality on hominoid foraging. She earned her BA in a 4-field anthropology program. Hunter, Kay Lindsay Hunter, the biological anthropologist. She received her master's from the University of Iowa. And at the Rising Star expedition, she met and later married her husband, Rick Hunter. I wanted to conclude with, I hope what this story, this expedition shows is that science is moved along by people, real people with quirks and interesting stories, and you never can tell who is going to make the next great discovery. But certainly it could be a man, it could be a boy, it could be a woman, it could be any one of you. Thank you, Toastmasters.